Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. This is a meeting between the Bangor City Council and the Bangor School Committee. Today is Wednesday, April 24th, and it is 5:17 p.m. Around the table here in the council chambers, we have Councillor Dean, Committee Member Ben Sprague, Councillor Fournier, Committee Member Bryden, Councillor Leonard, Councillor Yakubaga, Committee Member Imkajandro, just like saying your whole name, Councillor Trumbull, the School Committee Chair Mara Hassman, myself, the Council Chair Pelletier, and Councillor Schaefer. On Zoom, we have Committee Member Luciano. Hello, good to see you. And tonight we're here to talk about the fiscal year 25 school department draft budget. Would like to ask the Superintendent Tager and Director Hyman if they would join us at the table.
Okay. Well, hello. Thank you for inviting me. Earlier, I sent a packet of material, and a few days ago, with Superintendent Tager, finished a memo to complement it. So I'll go through the memo, and we can start in the material, and we can dive as deep as anybody wants. I have notes. It really depends on how much you want to hear, but let's begin and see where it goes. So the school department starts the budget process every year in mid-December. We distribute information to our administrative team. We work with them and ask for a budget back from them with a narrative of any personnel changes. We then, Superintendent Tager and myself meet one-on-one with every single administrator to get into the weeds of their particular division or school. And from there, we put together what amounts to is a first draft of the budget. And we discussed that with the school committee as a draft on March 14th. As a result of the workshop, we were out to sharpen a pencil and come back. And we did trim a little over $360,000 from the budget. We then came back for a first reading on March 20th. We were again asked to sharpen our pencils, and we came up with almost 269,000 in additional reductions. And we presented that to the committee on the 27th of March at a second reading where it did pass. So the budget that passed was $60,440,920. It represents an increase of $3,941,768, or just under 7%. And I gave some notes in the memo, what makes up the lion's share of that $3.9 million increase. I know that would be the first question I would ask. So with the existing personnel, we factored in a modest pay increase, and quite a few of our contracts include mandatory step increases, especially the teachers. And between the modest increase of existing personnel and step increases, which amounted to 3.32%, it came to $1,126,374. Then I moved on to new employees. We, in the course of putting together the budget, our special education needs continue to seem to grow exponentially. We're We're getting bigger numbers every year. And next year, this summer, we're going to construct 3 self-contained rooms, additional. So we're taking a space in 3 different schools and dividing it, so we can have that self-contained unit. And the requirements of the special education come down to 7 teachers and 9 ed techs. So when you do the some self-contained, it's a teacher and a minimum of 2 ed techs. But there are also resource room teachers and ed techs in there as well. And according to the numbers that were given to me, just this year, we've increased another 60 students from the prior year. So the projections are just continuing to grow. So the personnel positions identified in the special education are $553,480. We started most of the teachers off at the low end of the scale, and then we added 2 adult health insurance, and that's the magic formula we came up with to come up with the cost for those additional personnel. Additionally, we're also seeing a tremendous growth in our multilingual needs, and that's a federal requirement to provide services so anybody with any language can be educated in our school. And it required the addition of 3 extra ML teachers, and those do not come in at the minimum. That's a seasoned teacher to be able to perform those type of services. 3 of those teachers were $261,226. The next thing on the new employee list was graduation coaches. We paid for portions of 2 graduation coaches with our COVID money, and the portions of the 2 together added up to 1 FTE. And we recognize the tremendous success of the graduation coaches and the graduation rate, which is now around 90%. And we really wanted to keep that in place, and we actually wanted to stretch and move one of the grad coaches down into 2 middle schools where they could start the process of helping students stay focused on making it all the way through graduation. So the portions of those 2 employees, which makes 1 FTE, is $102,952. We had over 10 long-term subs. We had 1 dedicated to each school, 2 in the middle schools and the high school. We cut it down to just 1, but all those previously were funded by COVID. So the 1 that we did keep would have to be funded by the operating budget, and that's listed here as $30,000. And last, on the personnel funded by COVID, we have a mentor program that started a couple of years ago, and it's very successful with the students at all levels, student to student, staff to student, community to student. And one of our employees, a quarter of their FTE was previously funded through the COVID grant, performing mentor services, and we really wanted to keep that in place. So I've listed $18,540 for that quarter FTE to move over to the operating budget. Now, those new positions come with benefits, of course, and I didn't list them separately. I totaled them together, and the benefits for those new employees is $388,565. Most of it is bringing people in at a 2 adult rate for health insurance, which is costs like $22,000. It's really getting up there. The other big piece, of course, is, main PERS. That's currently at 4.47%. And every year they'll decide whether that stays the same or goes up. So the total for those employees is $388,565. Halfway through next year, January 1st, even though the rules are still being developed, there is going to be a paid FMLA tax. And the tax is 0.5% for the employer. And apparently after negotiating, potentially 0.5% for employees. We've taken a position where we're just budgeting our 0.5%. And for the 6 months, starting January 1st, is $89,306. We have money in here for a consultant. Part of our strategic plan that was done in 2019 was, they gave us a bunch of options, but the ones that we've decided on as a administration and as a school committee is to, we wanted to strategically tear down our fiscal plan. We have currently 10 schools. One of the options was to take the students out of our two older schools, which are Mary Snow and Fairmount. They're one's over 100 and one's very close to 100 years old. And we wanted to put an addition on our Dowdy School and our Cohen School and make that, both of those, a 4 through 8 school. We thought that would be beneficial for the students. It'd be one less transition in their life, going through the Bangor school system. And the savings from the fiscal plan is substantial. So we need to get on the sort of the state list. The deadline is August 30th. To do that, we'll need a consultant to help us with that. So we budgeted $120,000. The additional piece that we've targeted is no matter what option the consultant looked at, our Downey School was deemed not savable, basically. And it was recommended every option to simply build a new Downey's pre-K through 3 school. And it would be on the same location because there is enough land behind the school to build. So in a nutshell, there would be 2 wings on our current middle schools, mothballing 2 of our schools, and a new Downey School. So to do that, we would need state funding, or we couldn't pull off something that big. That's what the consultant's for. Additionally, Bangor High projects. We're currently in phase 1. We received some bids for phase 1. They were, let me just say, extreme. We rejected them all. We decided to utilize our internal maintenance staff and their expertise. We have an master electrician, and we have plumbing, HVAC services, and all around people that can do a lot of the work. Some of the work couldn't be done internally, and we've bid those pieces out. But what we're doing is a STEM room science total redo on all the rooms and bring them up from really dated to modern, and we're going to include an aquatic lab, which is quite exciting to everybody, which hadn't existed before. As part of that, we need to do construction, and we need the cabinetry and the furniture that goes with it. So what I've done is I've included money based on phase 1. What would phase 2 look like? Excuse me. And I've included those amounts in the budget. The other piece, the other project that I included in the budget is the loading dock area. The only loading dock we have at the school department is at the high school. It's currently not in compliance. It's too high currently. Besides making it compliant, that area has been targeted to have an external freezer for the food services program at our Bangor High School. We're running out of room. So the food services has already purchased a freezer. It's going to be an external freezer. We need to prepare the area outside for that. Food service cannot pay for any earthwork, but beyond the freezer and the electrical hookup of the freezer. So the school is going to fix our loading dock and prepare that area. On top of that project, we received a revolving loan fund, which we've discussed before, and the cafeteria wall, there's a curtain wall, part of the project that we're going to replace using the revolving loan fund. And I skipped over it, but the STEM room, the whole B side, which includes a lot of the STEM rooms, is also a curtain wall, and they'll be replaced using those funds as well. So those projects have been budgeted. None of them are emergencies. So to do them, I have to either finance them or put them in the budget. I believe I can manage to put these in the budget and pay for these without doing some sort of long-term debt service. Coming towards the end, the teachers, ed techs, administrators, all part of their work are encouraged and in some cases required to do additional learning as time goes on. For instance, the teachers, I believe, have to do, and I'll get it wrong, but it will be in the ballpark. It's like 6 credit hours every few years, and they have to keep learning. And a lot of them do, and a lot of them come in with a bachelor's and get their master's, or come in with a master's, get a second master's, or certificate of advanced study, you know, that type of thing. So we've taken a look at what will happen in the coming year, and one of the things that will affect our budget is the most of the learning takes place at the University of Maine, and the graduation per credit hour rate has gone up. It was going to go up $129 a credit hour next year, which is $387 for a 3 credit course. So we've increased the tuition next year at $99,086. Additionally, we're always keeping our textbooks up to date based on the requirements of the state, and we put an extra $79,500 in to fund some of those additional textbooks that were required for the coming year. So in a nutshell, that's about 3.6 million of the 3.9 million. I wanted to make sure I could highlight the pieces that are causing the budget to go up. I'm more than willing to go page by page through the packet if that's the desire of the finance committee. I just need to know before I get into page 10 and people start to nod off.
Chair.
Yes,
Well,
Councilor Trumbull.
I think that was the school board's job to go page by page through the budget, so I'm fine with the big picture. I mean, that's what you guys do. But I do have some questions when we get to the questions, but I don't know what
I think
how
we
other
can
people-
pause for questions, and if the questions are answered in the pages, let's direct them.
A bit, absolutely.
Sure. Would you like to start us
Sure.
off?
First, some of these questions are not all mine, you know, I think people knew we're having this meeting, and from my day job, I see people a lot, they say, oh, ask this, they say, oh, I'm asking a few questions that some people wanted me to ask, and one is actually one I was wondering about myself, and I wanted to start off by mentioning when Member Sprague used to be on sitting on this side of the city council, we were very fortunate that we would get budgets from the school department every year with 1% and 2% increases. And I know last year we had a big increase, and this year we've got a pretty substantial increase. So I know you guys have done your job and gone through the budget. I know initially it was 360,000 cut, and then in mid-March there was another 268,000 cut the initial budget. So I know you've already made cuts, but I know everybody at the table knows it's still a big increase. It has to. And so this the 3.9 million increase, how much of that would you say falls directly to the taxpayer? How much is gone under the 55% or other funding models? Like the special ed, is federal funding take care of any of those special ed costs and state funding?
So one of the first pages in we're past the cover page of the packet itself is the revenue. I always like to start there because this is how we pay for it if it passes at this level. So I'll take a moment to go through that if you like. So the revenue, like I said, was right behind the cover. And we keep the bottom half somewhat stable. Not my budget. Yeah, that's not bad. All right, so we keep the bottom half somewhat stable. Past the revenue page, I have definitions for every line there if somebody wants to know. But they're really tuition payments from outside or state agency students or sales or things of that nature, and they really don't move enough to try to bump something up or down $5,000. So I leave them alone. The real action is on the top of the revenue sheet, and that's where I'm going to start. So the first line is called a required local appropriation, and the state does an ED 279. So look back for the last 2 years, and they look at every aspect of your school, just like they look at every school, and they look and say, for your school makeup, we believe this is the minimum you need to raise locally to run your school. They're not asking a question, they're just telling you. So that amount for the coming year is $19,298,734. It's actually a very small decrease from the prior year. And the very next line is called local appropriation above required. So just like it sounds, if you want to do additional things with your school, activities, personnel, teaching, etc., beyond the minimum that the state says is required, you need to raise those locally as well. And that's where you see the biggest change next year. So the amount for this budget, the local amount above required is $11,275,091. That's an increase of just under $3.4 million. The next line that has numbers in it is called state aid. They on the ED 279 again, they look at your makeup of your school and they said, based on that, based on the budget, based on the percentage we're going to fund this year, all those things, we're going to give you $26,426,095. It's an increase of $572,902. It is a nice increase, but it is substantially less than has been received in the last few years, and I'll show you that sheet in a moment. So if our budget's going up and the increase in funding from the state is not quite as robust as the previous years, then more is gonna get shifted to the local.
Is that number firm right now, 572?
Well, it was a preliminary number and usually, I've only been around for a handful of years. And about half of those, we get a revised, report from the state. I've been looking at all the supplemental budget information, have not seen anything that says we're going to give additional dollars to education. So I am doubtful that the budget for next year will increase at all beyond the preliminary one that we received a few months ago. And then now they're in their rights to change it, of course, and they might. But right now I am not hopeful that we're going to give this magic golden egg, so to speak. So right now it's nice. It's went up almost $573,000, but just less than prior years. So what that means with that increase from the state, the rest of the increase would need to be funded through and raised locally. And that amount, net of the state would be $3,941,768 over the 7% we started the conversation with. So that's the increase as it's laid out, and that's how it would be paid for.
All right, so the impact on the taxpayer would be that subtotal, the 3,368,000, or like 12.3%.
Yes.
Okay, and when you went over the increases like the new employee benefits, what about existing employee benefits? Are those just in the increase in salaries within it in part?
That's, I identified, salary and step in the narrative, but I left about 300,000 unexplained.
Right, that's
And that's in there. There's inevitably, health insurance increases, et cetera. And just, real world expenses that happen. I didn't want to bog down.
right.
I tried to summarize it to one.
No,
page.
that's right. I figured it was in there. So the, on the first line in the other revenue was the tuition secondary. So how many, is that pretty stable, the tuition students at the high school? Is that, what do we have, like 50 tuition students? Bangor, is that what we generally had,
Well, the general rule of thumb is around $10,000 per student.
So a little over,
It's,
maybe 100,
so that's what,
yeah,
115.
100, yeah. All right.
Since we're on this page, the required local appropriation, why did that go down? Is it because we have fewer students? Or what is the cause for that?
It's 6 pages of data.
Okay,
I've gone through it a million times, and it's factors on students, and then they start breaking it down, teacher to student ratios, every aspect, grade school, middle school, high school, special ed is in there, transportation's in there, even co-curricular and extracurricular in there. The ML teachers are in there. The students, forgetting the term on high risk is the free reduced lunch students. That's what I'm trying to say. They were listed separately. So it hits every aspect of your school, and you would have to do a multi-year analysis to find out what's driving. I've noticed some trends, and we're gonna be talking about those in the coming years. The state tells you what the ideal ratios are, and we're pretty much in the ballpark with a lot of them. But some of them we think we can do better, and we're gonna work on that in the coming year. But 20,000 is just a blip comparative.
Counselor Schaefer?
I just had a couple of questions, like the long-term subs, are you factoring back in what per diem subs are counting, and so that's still
Yeah, the long-term subs are 150 a day,
or 40 days.
140 a day. And I believe the 90 are the regular subs, so there's almost a third savings there to bring them in.
And why does one school keep it? Is it that there's a lot of need for subs in it, or does that long-term sub go from school to school to school?
No, it was one school, and there was that school expressed a need, and the school committee, met that need.
And so why, I guess I'm just curious if it's, I mean, if it's privileged information, but why does one school need it when the other 9 don't?
I think that, that school based it on a need, the fact that they don't have a lot of other ancillary people at that school. Like, I have to be careful about, title dollars and those type of things, but some schools have more personnel than others.
Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, and so part of that whole process is if you go back and watch our very riveting budget meeting, there was a lot of back and forth to ask like our staff, our principals, what they needed. And as everybody knows, you come up with your dream budget right at the beginning. And when we asked them to say, again, evaluate these, is this a nice to have or is it a need, right? And so Superintendent Tager did a great job of really asking them that question directly and evaluating the entire picture. And one of the principals came back and said, it's not a nice to have for our school, it's an absolute need. So that was based on a lot of back and forth with the principals about what they could use and what they could kind of work around or without. So that's where that shift came from. But there was a lot of conversation about that particular one. In our world, we would have kept them all, but we are also cognizant of budget issues.
They're sensitive to the budget too, and one of the question that I was asked to ask was, would you want to have shared? And everybody thought that would be pretty difficult. So we at one time looked at taking that number of substitutes and cutting them in half and sharing them by the schools. But the principals really didn't think that would be that helpful. And so we ended up when the dust cleared with one.
Council Fournier?
I'm gonna go back to Counselor
No, I
Campbell's question.
don't want to monopolize. He's good to go.
I was gonna go back to your first
Oh,
question
okay.
regarding special ed and that budget. Is it offset specifically by state or federal or not?
Jerry mentioned the ED 279 and tell me if I'm wrong, but it's 1 year delayed. So in other words, we have a need for more special ed teachers, but we're not being given that appropriation of money till a year later. Is that accurate?
Yes,
So it's gonna be the next year that will.
More funding will come in, but we have the need now.
Right, okay.
And that's federal law.
Yeah, okay,
the funding that's been determined by the state was based on the October 23 and October 22 census counts.
yes.
So what we're doing next year, our increase in special ed, our increase in the ML students, they don't make it here, unfortunately.
Yeah. And that's fine. I
Before we-
did have other questions.
Yeah, before we leave that question, Christy, did you want to join us at the
Yeah,
table?
well,
for folks
I
at
can just
home?
answer that question. You're asking if I have federal dollars. There is a local entitlement grant that is federal money that filters to the state. And I have $1 million allocated for this current school year. I won't know until the end of this school year what I'll have for next year, but there is a federal piece to that. Yeah, so I wanted to clarify that for you, because you
Thank you.
asked that specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Do you have
won't-
another
so you
question?
won't- Yeah. So you won't know what that is until.
Why don't you just join
down
us?
the road.
I will not know. I have to do an end of year report in June, and then they determine how much.
So will that
money-
reflect it in the budget?
ED 279?
Yeah, will it change?
What she's talking about is a federal grant. There are no grants in this budget.
Okay,
These are, if you will, just operating general fund dollars. So the grants are nice, and what the grants could do, if it was substantial enough, you could fund a position or positions there and not have to do it here, but we don't know.
okay, and that's fine. So it's very conservative,
Yes.
and that's great. Thank you.
And I have to spend a portion in local entitlement before I can go to the general fund.
Okay,
Like I have to divide.
great. The other question I have is going back to those capital expenditures. for the high school, 790,000 roughly. You didn't want to finance it.
I did not,
Why?
because I'm going to come to you very soon to, we discussed at a previous meeting, the successful 4 revolving loan funds, 4 projects.
Yep.
And 2 of those, beyond the dollars with the bond bank will require bonding to complete the projects. Specifically the strengthening of the roof of Mary Snow
Right.
and the curtain wall project at Bangor High. And also I'm going to ask you for, potential for bonding to repair the roof at the William Cohen School. So I'm already gonna come to you with a good slate of, shall we say, of debt service requests that you will have to consider and hopefully approve. And I was trying to get this one through the budget, but when you do that, this is what happens. It comes out and boom, it's right in your face.
Right.
You see the number and, you can't do a ton of these because it's a direct, immediate impact on the taxpayer. What we're bonding obviously is usually, 10 years or 20 years, and it's kind of the effect of that debt service is kind of diminished a little bit by that staggering of the payments.
I get it, and that's why I asked the
Yeah.
question, because
Yes,
we're at a 7% increase, and if we can cut it back a little bit, then I understand it might be, we're kicking it down the road, but I'm just
well,
throwing that out there.
if that's,
And on top of that, there was the construction for the rooms for special ed. I didn't know what that dollar amount was,
those are fairly inexpensive.
Okay.
So we've kind of,
under 100,000.
way under 100,000.
Okay, so that's fine. Yeah, I guess that was really my driving question, if we could kind of cut back on that. My other question was, what are you seeing from other schools? Or what are you hearing?
Other districts?
Yeah,
Just a couple, Brewers at 8%, Lewiston's at 13%. So I think, everybody's running out of COVID dollars the end of September of this year. So there are adjustments. I wish I could tell you ours was lower than 6.98, but I think we're in the ballpark and maybe on the lower side for districts that are large.
okay.
Do you have follow-on
Just a
questions?
couple quick ones. One, on the initial cuts that were made by staff, whether it's 360 and the 270, don't need too specific, but generally, what were the initial, what was cut initially?
Well, most of the long-term subs went, that was one of the big chunks, I think altogether, that was
Kinda,
around 300,000. And we're down to 30,000 plus in taxes. So that was a big chunk. And then we moved, one of our positions to the title grant for the coming year. I believe that was a math coach. Thank you. Yeah, good confirmation. And so the math coach, was also funded by COVID. And we saw the benefit of those services. We didn't want to lose them. So we believe we can fund it for one full year with title money, before we have to make a hard decision a year from now. So
You took a position.
Councilor
Yeah.
Schaefer?
I just had two things, like I know that for years there was a lot of pride in having a flat budget, but I also think that I think it's like, I didn't spend a lot of money on my house for a long time, and now I need to replace all the windows, and now I need to replace the roof, so I think we're also seeing a little bit of deferred maintenance coming through, and even though it's personnel and things like that. The other thing that I thought we would get it at this meeting, and maybe it's, but like a sort of historical, information on enrollments and free and reduced lunch numbers and all of that. I think that's one of the things that I would want to make sure that
Well, I think that,
oh, is it in here?
No,
no, he was teasing me.
I was teasing him and I better have it because I produced it.
Well, there, like, I feel like we used to get like a chart that would show like the schools and the free and reduced lunch, and I just think it's one of our biggest areas of, we've done a lot with DEI, but it's one of our biggest areas of inequity, is that our schools are super unequal across, you know, every time I'm very proud West Sider, but boy, you cannot get the bus when it's a joint thing for band or for the joint field hockey team, you cannot get that bus to force kids to the west side to pick up.
I'm
And
gonna have to eat my
think
words.
little things like that. I
Yeah.
would just like to see how that is trending and to make sure that we're providing equal access across our schools.
I printed off 3 copies just for you.
That are district.
All of that info is on a state website. I can send you the link, but it's got every
Great.
school in the
I've,
state.
I've seen that and, but I feel like we used to get a nice little chart that had it all
Yeah.
spelled out for just us, because I'm very familiar with that
Isn't that
website.
something? All right, so
Is it like E something? I feel like it's ESI or something like that.
what I had for you was simply the census count for the students by school.
Yeah.
I did not have the free and reduced
I feel like we used to
information.
get one that had the census and it had also this is the free and reduced percentage. It used to be like in the communique, we also come out just to the public, which is valuable information for the public to know.
It is
Council-
true that, I'm sorry,
No, go ahead.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay.
It is true that all the east side schools have free and reduced lunch rates that are less than half of their west side counterparts. I appreciate you bringing up that.
Well, it's noticed that, you know, all the band, like honors band is this weekend, and my daughter is a very accomplished flautist and loves band, but it's always the west side that drives over, and Cohen kids are always picked up at their school, and they're always there, and there just seems to, even outside of the budget, can we put somebody in the budget to force the east side parents to pick up at the west side once in a while? It would be nice, thank you.
Maybe an ordinance. I don't know. Council Fournier? You had some follow-on questions?
Yeah, just on that local appropriated above required.
Yes,
So is there a debt service?
Mhm.
Is debt service within that, or is
yes, it is.
it's within that figure, not the required local appropriation?
Debt service is in our $60 million budget.
No, I know, but where's that coming from? Where, is it being offset by anything? If we borrow money, is it being offset?
It's funded through the local,
Appropriation above required?
yes,
Okay,
the short answer, yes.
okay, thank you. The other question I had was, so I would anticipate next year that the expenses would be coming down at least to 790
Yes,
plus whatever money would be coming in for special ed.
yes, that 790 obviously would be a one-time
Right.
expenditure. Unless some director of business services trying to sneak in another project, but I wouldn't do that. But, yes, you're absolutely right. It should come down because the project would be complete and
Right.
those dollars would not be in there.
Thanks.
There are counselors' questions? The only other ask I would have is, as you're pulling together the equity numbers, can you give us a breakdown of the cost per student for fiscal year 25 as compared to some of the other districts in the state? Or for 24, like how are we trending against
Okay,
sort of average expenditures? I'm sure the state has like average dollar amount per student.
they do. That's one of my slides in one of my packets. I compare us to the state, but I don't incorporate other districts in there. But everything's public, so I suspect I can put something together.
I really don't need every district in the state. I'm just curious about kind of the bigger.
Like
areas.
Lewiston.
Yeah,
Portland,
Lewiston.
South Portland, West Portland, those areas.
Yeah,
Because what I present to the school committee is the total elementary and the total secondary cost. And then the state looks at it. They have categories. They want everybody It starts off with, regular instruction and special education and other instruction and on it goes, but they say these 10 and they code everything. So everybody funnels the money through. It's not a sort of a guessing game because they want everything apples to apples. And then you can then look at per student costs for your district against the state average. And that's what I have shown the committee, but I can expand it to multi-districts.
Thank you.
And leave the state average in there for you as
That'd be
well.
great. Thank you. Oh, the conversation has really been directed by counselors asking questions to our fearless school committee. What would you add? Questions or thoughts for us? Things you want us to consider?
For context, sorry.
But that's okay.
I think, everything really has been covered well by Jerry and Jim. I do want to add that Portland's at 6.6%. One of the school committee members sent me that. And that we really have done due diligence, taking into account, what the principals have told us and the administrators, going page by page, several months of going back and forth and trying to really be mindful of the taxpayers. And so, we feel like we are up against the wall. It's a tough year, but I think, as we've seen, many of the bigger districts are facing the same thing. So just leave you in with that. Oh, Tim, yeah.
Welcome, Member Surratt.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Quite an echo. I just want to dovetail on a point from Councilor Schaefer from earlier. As we all know, there's been intense inflationary pressure over the past 2 years, and all institutions feel that inflationary pressure, including schools. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind.
Thank you.
In the, I meant to mention in the packet, I had page 12, so I'm not 100% confident, but it looks like this. It's kind of a lot of color, so pretty easy to identify. What this shows you is the left-hand column is the increase or decrease from the state every year. And the right-hand side is the increase or decrease from the local share. So you'll see the trending on that I was referring to earlier in from basically 2021 to 24, that it was a very nice increase from the state every year. This year is still a nice increase, but not as nice, not as big, I should say. And unfortunately, that with the additional staff requests, it translates to the right-hand column, which is larger than normal increase requests from the school. So everybody starts in 2010, so there's 15 years of data here for you to look at what's happened between the two sides of the equation.
Larger than ever.
Yes.
Just also kind of piggybacking on what Councilor Schaefer had said before, is that looking back historically in the tight budgets that we've kept and now the repairs that we have to keep up with, in addition to our changing student needs, I think that it's important to keep in that consideration when you look at the breakdown of where the increases come from. It's not like frivolity, right? We're halfway through a STEM renovation. We have to redo the loading docks, and we need to make sure the students are taken care of. And I think not just looking at the bigger schools, but also I was looking at some information up from the county, and Caribou, for example, is also facing a huge budgetary increase this year. I can't remember the percentage, but they're now looking at slashing staff as a way to fix that problem. And so I think that when we look across the state, school budgets are what they are to a certain extent. And I think we all hope that it's a blip like on the yearly radar and things will kind of flatten out again next year. So I think when we think about context for things, given our historical smaller increases, might just be one of those kind of unfortunate boom years for us.
Just one more point too, that I know we've had a lot of questions about why was it in the past just a 1% increase or 2%? And we're seeing this kind of inflated, or what people think is an inflated budget, but there has also been an increase of special ed students. And I mean, we know that post-COVID, or hopefully now post-COVID, that there has been increased numbers of students with mental health issues as well. And so we're seeing an increase of that. And I know Director Babin can speak to that. And we have like Dr. Rogers, who has told us that we will continue to see an increase in mental health issues, and also an increase in ML students as well, which is a beautiful thing to have, but we have to keep up with those needs as well.
Councilor
what-
Fournier.
So what do you anticipate that extra funding that we'll get for the special needs? Not this year, but next year.
I got the same question from Deb.
I was gonna say, perhaps the city manager asked that question.
She did, and I dug hard. And the state's website is not as up to date as I had hoped, and on the ED 279, special education is simply one line. So then you need to go and find a resource at the state to how in the world did you come up with this number? I couldn't quite do it, and I had to confess, I looked for a long time. I was able to nail the increase on the ML students, and I gave Debbie a dollar, right to the dollar amount. It was a pretty good dollar amount that if those students were counted this year, it was between 200,000 and 300,000, I believe. But I couldn't come up with a special education. What I did tell her was special education students stayed fairly flat between the 2 years, and the special education amount went up 400,000 between this year and last year. So with our additional students, I can't imagine it's not going to continue that trend. I don't have a dollar amount for you. I wish I did. And I'm gonna get to the bottom of it, it's just not as apparent as on the form as you would hope it would be. But I will find out going forward, because it's a question that needs to be answered, and for transparency and planning and all of that. So we're on it. I don't have the answer. I just know it's trending up. When the students between 2 years in the ED 279 did not increase a lot. So that's the answer I can give you.
Thanks.
I mean, just a comment that even though we have this increase, but it's conservative, truly. I mean, we are barely meeting the needs of our teachers and our children. Sorry. All right. It's that fault. Yeah, that's what I need to say. So I think you guys, I mean, you did your due diligence, and it looks balanced to me. I mean, as much as you try to stay at a reasonable rate, I mean, you did your best to just come up with this budget that meets the needs. In the end, we need to meet our values, like what do we want to achieve for our children and our teachers alike, making resources available for both to achieve high standard education. And I think this budget reflects that. And I want to thank you for it.
Thank you.
Councilor Trumbull?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, I hope nobody took my comment about past increases, these increases, criticism, just to back to life, that's what we're dealing with. Everybody's done a great job, but when people get the tax bill, the people in Bangor can only afford so much. The people who live in poverty in the city of Bangor is rising, median income is not going up, and people just can't afford these tax bills anymore. I mean, what's a typical tax bill now in the city? Oh, around 2,500.
No, I think it's about, is it 3,400?
A typical bill?
Yeah, it sounds about thirty.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the budget.
Yeah, so,
Is your budget?
I mean, if that goes up, 12%, that's,
It's right here.
like $400. And then that's just on the education side.
I think this is for all of us. I'm gonna go back home and my husband's gonna be
But
there.
that's just for the
What are
average
you guys
person.
doing?
So think about what the average person can
We do
afford.
what we need.
I mean,
to do.
somebody that's got a $500,000 house is
Right, the
a
average,
lot more.
the average tax bill right now
Can we have
is
one
3,000.
conversation at a time, please? Thank you.
The average tax bill at the moment is $3,800.
Yeah.
As the proposed budget stands right now, it increases to over $4,200. It's a $225 increase related to the
Right,
schools
it's an average.
and $177 related to the
Right.
city,
Yeah, just,
as it
I
stood.
just want people to keep that in mind, that's all.
At my house, it's $217.83 for the school budget. That's the additional. That's before we talk about what the city portion needs to be too. And I do think it's important that we keep that in mind. I'm not saying it's not worth it.
Right.
But there's, people are, again, just like last year, just like last few years, experiencing inflation in every area of their lives. And at some point, it becomes a situation where people can no longer afford to live in Bangor because the taxes are too high. So as we go through the rest of our budget cycle, I'm glad yours is over for you. I love that for you. But those are the numbers that we're gonna have in the back of our head. Those are the considerations that we're gonna need to make. And I will go back to, again, what I said last year, which is when you knock on doors and ask people, what do you love about Bangor? They love the schools and they love the parks. And so, it's, good things are worth preserving and investing in. It just comes down to how much and when.
So I sensed I sensed a few themes amongst all of you while you were speaking. And, I think we are trying to deliver the value to make sure that we have the resources. I heard sort of the delay, the business manager and the superintendent and I have talked about how the lag of funding. So what you're seeing is how the state funding comes through is lagging by a year, so that when you have these changes in your populations, it takes a year. So it is a sort of a temporary. Also, he was very honest about the one-time capital cost in his operating budget. Schools are not able to carry reserves for capital purposes like the city can. However, they do have some fund balance and there are some other reserves. So I'm just curious and sorry to surprise anybody, but maybe there's an opportunity for the finance director and I to work with and see if there are some other capital opportunities. Because if we can remove the one-time costs from impacting the taxpayers or minimize that, I think that would be really helpful, which we have more flexibility on the city side to do that because we have reserves. So maybe we have some opportunities to look at that a little bit differently if people would be comfortable with that.
Yes,
Okay,
very much.
cool.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So just a clarifying
Yeah.
question, that wouldn't impact us when it,
It would. So if, for example, we could find some alternate ways to fund some of your one-time capital
Yeah.
costs, it would allow you all to reduce your budget.
Oh, okay, but not negatively, that's what.
No, the projects don't go away, but can we get a little bit creative
Okay, yeah. go ahead.
with how we
can
would
get some
propose
help.
to fund
Mhm. Sure.
what are one-time costs? I would never urge or recommend anybody get creative with funding ongoing recurring costs.
Mhm.
But if we can get a little creative with those one-time capital costs, let's
Yeah.
take that as an opportunity.
Sounds
Yeah, hang on,
Okay.
before we go to you, Member Sprague.
I just want to offer a word of support for that, even though what Jerry was saying about future
Correct.
pending capital needs.
Correct.
If you fund one-time high school improvements right now, it's all the current taxpayers that have to pay for it. But if you bond it over like 20 years, then it's the future students and everybody will pay it steadily over time, which is the proper mechanism to pay an ongoing thing for the people who are going to use it over the next 20 years. Even though the interest rates are high, but maybe you can refinance at some point.
Typically, it's just, now I'm gonna get all geeky and you drag me down the hall and I can't stop myself, so. So typically, whenever the city does issue bonds, we have a call provision. And the call provisions will allow us to refund our debt throughout the term so that we can take advantage of changing interest rate environments.
I like that
Thank
idea, I gotta talk to my bank about the call provision, I
Yeah.
like that.
Councilor Trumbull, did you have a question?
Yes, on that, I agree with, I think that's a great idea.
Okay,
But on the other thing, on the special ed funding,
yes,
there's a gap, it's gonna come in next year, and we don't wanna fund
Right.
things. But that's something you could do with, like, the fund balance.
Yeah.
Because next year the money's gonna be there, so it's not,
Right.
would that make sense with one?
It may, but I want,
When you look,
as,
when you have those discussions.
correct, as we have those
Yeah.
discussions, certainly something we can consider, yes.
I do have, current free and reduced numbers. Assistant Superintendent, Harris Smedberg, found it for me. Thank you very much. The, overall, 45% district-wide is free and reduced. It goes from a high of 80%, 85% at one school down to about 29 is the lowest I can see, and everything in between. So, and as you can imagine, the Downey School is the high number there, but it averages 45% of all of our students.
Those are people who qualify. Everybody gets it, right?
Right now, everybody gets it,
Yeah.
but if they ever go back to the old way, which
I
I
can't,
really like kids eating.
Yeah.
So,
right.
so keep it going.
And that'll be
State of Maine.
standardized, yeah.
Yeah.
everybody's different.
Makes it better for them for sure. But if they ever went back to the old way and you had to fill out the form and qualify, that's what it would look like.
Counselor Schaefer?
One thing that I would, and me and we're all in busy season, but if there was ever a time that someone could sit down and show sort of maybe like a 5 to 7 year look back of the history to see how that has changed, because I do feel like that has changed a lot, even in the years since my kids have been in school, and just as that has shifted, I just think it's a data point that we should be aware of when we're making decisions about our schools. And also just that, I mean, in higher ed, we're talking about the demographic cliff that's coming in 2 years. And so I'm sure that if it's coming in 2 years, and it's probably already here for you guys, you just do some simple math, but just wondering what the trends are and what you're seeing just for census numbers and all that.
So unfortunately, I'm so disappointed in myself. I was ready for it. I have 10-year look at our student census by school, and I was gonna probably hand it to him the second he asked for it. It's sitting in my desk.
He's talked about this incessantly too.
Yeah, I was ready. I was ready for you.
I think he's
So
trying to give us.
I'll accept the email, probably right
Yeah.
after the school board.
So what I'll do is I'll scan it to Debbie, and she can send it out to the group.
This is just something that teachers across the district experience every single day. I promise I did it. I left it at home. So we just get to have that unique experience right now.
Yeah, it's a little embarrassing and a little disappointing, all in one.
Everyone who wanted to speak tonight have a chance to be heard. Parting thoughts for the good of the body?
I know you guys have beat this to death, but thank you for all the work that you've done.
Yes.
We just want to beat it a little bit more.
Thank you very much for your hard work on this. Thank you for taking the time to walk us through it and answer the questions. Good luck with your meeting tonight.
Thank you.
We are adjourned. Thank you.